So today I'm sitting down with somebody that's a little bit different from the normal podcast flavor that we have here. Her name is Jemima Kartolo, Team Kartolo here that works with me at Harcourts. And the reason why I thought it would be interesting to sit down and have this conversation with Jemima is because Jemima is in the same position that my poor daughter is in now. Whereas Jemima is a first-generation Kiwi. Her parents moved over from Indonesia,
yeah.
And settled here, and then had her and her brother. And I wanted to have that conversation a little bit about your experience, about your parents' experience. But first, let me just say thank you for sitting down and having a conversation with me.
That's okay.
We were going to try to have Jeremy as well, but real estate is a busy industry. And thankfully, Jemima was able to clear some time to have a conversation today. And if it goes well, maybe we'll do Jeremy as well. So I've done enough yapping. So let's go ahead and start with this. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sweet. So my name is Jemima Kartolo. I was born in Auckland, and so was Jeremy.
See, I didn't know that, actually.
Did you not?
I didn't. I thought you were born local.
No, we moved down in 2011.
Oh, Lord, that's when I graduated high school. We're not talking about that.
No, yeah, whole family moved down in 2011, but we're what do you call it? We're Jaffers.
Yeah.
And our parents moved to New Zealand in 98 because of the riot in Jakarta. Big riot, which caused a lot of them to flee, so.
That's something that I'd have to do a little bit of research on. And, forgive me, you guys as well, because Americans are terrible with their world history.
No, you're fine.
So 1998, Jakarta rebellion?
Massive riot between the indigenous Indonesians and like the Chinese Indonesians.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Like 3 days of, the movie The Purge?
Oh, no, really?
Pretty much 3 days of The Purge.
Oh, wow.
And so that just 3 days of that, and like months after, it was just people fleeing, including my parents.
So were your parents already in a relationship at the time? Were they married?
They were married, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Already married.
That's horrific.
Yeah, and they didn't want to start a family.
Understandably so.
Yeah, with that around. Like, it could have happened any time afterwards. Not that it hasn't,
Yes.
but it could have.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's way more intense than I anticipated. But
yeah.
Wow. That's really good context, though, because you can see where they came from and what they were moving to.
Yeah.
Do you know why they chose New Zealand particularly?
I think they were applying for Australia originally.
Were they?
And they couldn't get it in time, so New Zealand was quicker, and it was just need out ASAP, so...
Yeah, fair enough, too.
If they could get they got New Zealand, so they were, out of there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, obviously that's their motivation for leaving. Tell me a little bit about your parents' personalities, because that's just interesting. We'll start
there. Well, my mum spoke English a lot better than my dad, and so they both moved, and they both got jobs pretty quickly. My dad worked 3 jobs when Jeremy was born, and then when I was born, my mum worked more than my dad, so it was just a bit of a swap there, trying to balance out having kids. And because they had uni degrees and everything, but it's just a bit different, language barrier. You could be really high up in Indonesia, but moving to New Zealand, language is definitely number one. And then just different, culture of work. So it was just a bit difficult that they just had to kind of get any job to live.
Well, and I mean, not in the same way, but I can sympathize a little bit, because my first time trying to apply for jobs here was during COVID.
Right.
Which they really were very focused on hiring Kiwis first. Understandably so. But it was very tricky to find a job at the time, especially with my qualifications. I was slightly overqualified, unfortunately, for a lot of the things I was applying for, because I was just desperate.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, too, the desperation that you'd feel having Jeremy and potentially wanting to expand the family down the line to be able to provide for that. So, wow, what an amazing story. And funnily enough, I actually knew your dad before I knew either of you.
How?
Yeah, actually, Rasa.
Oh, right.
I frequented Rasa Asia, which is a family restaurant for the Kartolos. I frequented that quite a bit before I met these two, but I also, my wife, I think, worked with your dad at the hospital.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Small town Timaru,
Yeah.
but, gotta love it. Anyway, so how much younger are you than Jeremy? When were you born?
I was born in 2002. He was born in 1999, so 3 years.
Okay, I am old in this conversation. Wow. So, as a first-generation Kiwi,
Yes.
so obviously we've heard this backstory. It's quite a harrowing backstory and quite traumatic, I can imagine, for your poor parents to get set up out here. Was there anything that, when you were younger, you recognized specifically, okay, so my parents do this differently than the culture that I'm in?
Yeah, definitely.
Anything
Like,
that pops up?
like an identity crisis, being at school with, other, like there were other immigrant kids as well, but, if you go to like a play date at a household, there's Jeremy, sorry, with a Kiwi, I think maybe having shoes on in the house was one thing.
Really?
Yeah, we like always take our shoes off at home, but now I have my shoes on at home because it's just like, as I grew up, like I just kind of, my Kiwi culture is more strong now, like a lot more stronger than when I was younger, and my parents were both there saying, you need to take your shoes off and blah, blah, blah kind of thing.
Oh, that's quite interesting. I have a hard time wearing shoes inside too, and I think Florida is just so hot that you never want to wear shoes, period, but...
Oh, right, yeah.
Having it anyway. Yeah, I think we may have Jeremy come in here in a minute, and we'll introduce him if he comes in. But let's see here. Is there anything else that really stuck out to you? You say an identity crisis.
Oh, yeah, I think it was like that identity crisis is definitely more of like when I'm in New Zealand, we're Asians. In Asia, or in Indonesia, we're too white.
So interesting.
Yeah. And so our family members, they say, oh, you're so like whitewashed and white cultured. And I'm like, but we're not. Like, we still have all the same culture, values, all that, beliefs and all that. But it's just like, it's completely different apparently. Yeah. Like how they live and everything.
Yes. Was there anything that your parents brought you up with that you realized was different?
Yeah. Definitely the language. Like at home I would speak the language, Indonesian, if they spoke to me in Indonesian, and outside just English all the time. And so that was probably the major, that was like, it's not much of it, it's not like a big deal, but that was definitely the big thing for me, was just language.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like you had any sort of detriment or benefit to being first generation Kiwi? So when you're being brought up through the school system, trying to figure out how things worked with parents who don't necessarily know how everything worked, was there anything that you felt held you back, that you felt maybe gave you a heads up, or just kind of where you feel like you were?
Yeah, yes and no. So like, with like maths, that was, I felt like they taught me at home really well. And so like in primary school, I was always on top of that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, the subject English and, social studies was not a common thing for them growing up. So it's not like I could ask them for help with that. So there's just different subjects and all that. But yeah, like it was just, yeah, it's all different. But to me, like that's so normal because I watched Jeremy grow up like that, and so did I. And well, I mean, you're in a household and you don't see the other kids growing up in a different way. So I thought that was normal.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's something that I have a little bit of fear with my daughter specifically too, and probably was a fear going through your parents' heads as well, is, there's so much out there that I just genuinely don't understand and don't know. Especially my daughter's just started school this week, and I have no idea what the school system is like here. It's way more rigorous and intense feeling in the States, but I have genuinely no clue. So that's why this conversation, I feel like, is so valuable for me in particular. Just thinking about being a parent and this whole kind of similar-ish situation. Not necessarily quite as extreme because we do share a language.
Yeah.
Though there are quite a few cultural differences.
Yes.
Well. Have you spent any time back where your parents came from?
Yeah. So when we were younger, I must have been about 3 or 4. So Jeremy would have been like 6 or 7. We went back and lived there for about 9 months.
Really?
Just very briefly.
Yeah.
Like, so I went to school there for a little bit. So that's how I learned more of the language and all that. And then we would try to visit as much as we could. Like, it would be in periods of either like a year, after year after year, and then it'll be like a gap of like 7 years, and then like it was just as much as we could. But yeah.
Fair enough. So that first period where you went back for 9 months, was that, do you know if that was kind of intended on seeing if they could move back, or was that just kind of an experiment, or just an immersion in the culture? Do you know? You were young.
I think it was my grandmother was sick.
Oh, yes.
My dad's mum was sick. And so we went back to kind of, be with the family.
Yeah.
And then that was just the case. But I was so young, like, I don't remember things. I just remember, like, we were there for that long.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, going to school for a bit. Yeah.
Did you have any extended family that moved over with you, or was it just your direct family?
Yeah. My mum's older sister. So my auntie and my 2 cousins were in Auckland with us. Okay. They're in Australia now, but they moved over. So we grew up with cousins. Mm-hmm. But that was another struggle, was that once they moved to Aussie, we were just our family in New Zealand. We have no other relatives.
Pretty isolating.
Like you can imagine, like there's no one else. Like we have no family here, and it's sad.
Did you find that the community kind of helped you guys out, that kind of adopted you, or did it still feel quite isolating?
We have like family friends, and I think that's what you find often is like you'll see like lots of races gather together because they're like the same people, same culture and all that. So, like the group of Indonesians or group of Chinese or group of, Indians or whatever, they all flock together.
Yeah.
And so my parents had family friends, and so we like know each other. So yeah, I guess it was like, it wasn't lonely. It was just like that we didn't have any family members, but there was family friends.
Yeah, and we find that too. We moved over here and immediately had some connections with a church family here.
Right.
That really helped us kind of get our ground underneath us. And there's still to this day, some of our closest friends was just on a stag do this weekend with one of them.
Oh.
Sorry, Matt.
Right. Yeah, I've seen your TikToks on that.
Yeah. That was not pretty, and I apologize for that. But it was a bit of fun. But yeah, they definitely adopted us. We have several people who are surrogate grandparents to my daughter, which has been fantastic. She grows up with that, still having those people that we kind of consider family, just adopted family in a way.
Yeah.
And we had that back in the States. It's hard to fathom just how big the States is, really. But my family all moved down from Iowa to Florida. Now that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
I mean, to drive there, it took us 2 days. It was 25 hours by car to get there. It was far too expensive to fly back in the day. We do that every 2 years or so. 12 hours one day, 13 hours the next in the car.
Oh, jeez.
Hiking all the way up there. So we really, I didn't really grow up with grandparents per se, surrogate ones, but yeah, so I kind of get that. Do you know of any particular challenges that your parents faced coming over here?
It would, honestly, again, that language barrier. Secondly, probably financials as well. Like I imagine lots of people migrate out of their country to make more money.
Yes.
Although that wasn't like primarily the case for my parents, but like they struggled.
Yeah.
Which is why they worked so many jobs. But they worked so hard to get us here, and like, we're just like, well, Jeremy and I are definitely grateful for how hard they've worked for us.
Well, I think I see that in your work ethic as well, and what you do with your business. You know, Jeremy is quite young to be in the real estate industry, and he has made quite the name for himself in a relatively short amount of time. Jemima is just, I say recently, but it's like dad brain recently. You've been with Jeremy now for quite a while.
Yeah.
Would be a year and a half?
Coming up, like since I started as a PA, which was in 2022, so coming up to 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just
Crazy.
goes to show you how bad I am at clocking time.
Yeah, about a year and a half,
How long has it been since you had your license?
Coming up to a year.
Okay.
Oh, license. Oh, sorry, actually, almost 2 years. Almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's probably more what I was thinking.
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
I wouldn't have interacted with you nearly as much as I do now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely see that work ethic that's kind of been handed down through the generations, because you guys work your butts off. You really do.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's that like? Do you feel like you took some of those lessons? Do you feel like that's kind of self-motivated? Do you like
100% both.
Yeah.
Because we saw how hard they worked, you want to work harder.
Yeah.
You know, just so that you could, like, in a sense, just provide more even for yourself and your future families and all that. So, yeah, and definitely like the work ethic has been handed down from the parentals as well. So yeah.
So what were some of the, you know, besides the language, you mentioned the shoes, which I think is quite interesting, but were there any other big cultural differences between your household and maybe like when you went over to a friend's house?
Oh my God.
Sorry, I'm springing some of these.
Gosh, I haven't even thought about like the massive cultural differences between them, besides like different language, different foods.
I mean, it's quite good in a way and reassuring to me, because you know, the fact that you felt so comfortable and slotted in everywhere and really couldn't identify the differences off the top of your head makes me feel good. It makes me feel like Millie will just kind of slot right in perfectly wherever she is. Because I remember, you know, she was 2 years old and she came to us, and you know, 2 years old, you don't really speak that clearly. But I just remember her going, "Mommy, I want a bath," but mumbled it in her little like toddler speak. And we couldn't quite understand her, so Alana goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really get that. What was it?" And she goes, "Can I have a bath?" So, you know, at 2 years old, she already could understand the dialectual differences between the U.S. and here, and knew that we were the odd ones out. So it was really quite interesting, but she slotted in perfectly.
So she knows that.
Oh yeah, she knows. She knows there's something different about mom and dad. And you know what? I hope she doesn't hold it against us. If you're watching this in the future, Mill, I really do hope that you don't hold it against us.
Sorry, just to add though.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's actually like growing up, it was always like, oh, like, why am I different? Why am I from a different cultural background? Blah, blah, blah. But actually, like, as you're older, it's super cool because you get to embrace both cultures.
That's really
like separately, but also at the same time. Like, I feel like you just appreciate the fact that you can bring another culture into New Zealand. But I'm not like, my culture isn't forcing it on people. Like, that's just for yourself and that's your identity. So it's just like, both cultures create who you are today. Like, when Millie grows up, she's going to be like, you know, who she is because of you and Alana's backgrounds and her culture from school and her friends and living in New Zealand. And it's cool.
Well, I like that story too, because that's quite a bit of the whole national direction of what New Zealand's going through at the moment too, with Maori and Papua, is trying not necessarily to have these cultures just mashed together and be one thing. They're definitely trying to find this balance between being distinct and honoring each other's cultures as well, which I think is quite interesting. And
just respectfully
living. As best we can. Because there are differences and there are things that don't necessarily mesh really well between cultures. But, and I think part of the point of this whole thing, the whole thing that I want to get to is that, you know, we come from different backgrounds, but we're bigger than that. We're bigger than some of those differences. Some of those differences are good. Some of them are, you know, just different. It's hard to figure all that out. Do you have any advice that you could give me to kind of support my daughter as she's growing up in this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, I think, to embrace the differences. Because if you try to separate them, then I feel like you'll have that, like, identity crash and crisis, because she'll be like, am I American or am I Kiwi? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if she embraces it, you know, then it just kind of gracefully just creates her personality and her identity in a way that is just natural and it's just not forced. I don't know, I think she just should embrace growing up and in this culture. This is where she lives it now, and well, lives now. She was born here, so
yeah, she was.
So
But,
this is her life, you know. It's not like how you grew up. So just for her to really embrace that she's very privileged to be here in New Zealand.
Oh, there's just so much to figure out, and I feel many days as if I am bumbling my way through the darkness, trying to sort it all out in my head.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine, and you know, the stories that you're telling about your parents and what they've gone through is actually quite inspiring and quite interesting. Because, man, to leave on the cusp of that, to drop everything, go to a country that you're unfamiliar with, and work so darn hard to provide for your family is so admirable and so incredible. And, you know, I know your family a little bit, and it's been amazing to watch and to watch you guys as well. But yeah, I think that's kind of getting us close to the end of what we were talking about here today. And thank you for that.
That's
a little bit of reminiscing, a little bit of digging into your past. And
gosh, I feel like I wish I came a bit more prepared, but
that's all right. That's part of this. And again, the idea here is watching what I'm watching back in the States, and you know, not to try to compare apples to apples here, but you know, I'm seeing some of these same things that are happening that are making me want to be over here, and to work even harder to stay here and to be a part of the community and be a part of the culture that's being brought up in New Zealand. But, you know, I think that there's so much value when we're seeing so much division in taking the time to find these similarities and to have these discussions and to realize that, you know what, the work ethic is the work ethic. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Yeah.
The drive to find better, you know, sometimes better isn't always where you're at. Sometimes it is good to go back and to be involved in that.
Yeah.
Find your roots. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to do that. And it's all okay. But having these conversations, trying to meld that understanding and trying to, you know, keep from having this us-them mentality.
Yeah, definitely.
It's quite good.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time.
That's all right.
If anybody out there has any questions for Jemima, please go ahead and chuck them in whatever comment section that you'll find this on. She's already scared, I can tell you that. But no, this has been really, really good. And, you know, maybe we'll make a list of other questions that people ask and do it again. And maybe we can nail Jeremy down to have a bit of a conversation as well.
We'll have to book him like 3 weeks in advance, sit him down.
And tell him he's not allowed to book anything.
Yeah.
You guys got to make the podcast big enough for that so that he actually puts the time. I'm kidding.
No.
Anyway, thank you again, Jemima. I appreciate
That's right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we look forward to maybe doing it again in the future.
Yeah.